You talk about that day and picking your parents up. Where were you when you heard about the crash?
Desert Storm had just ended. And so my mother had been fearful, and she thought she wasn't going to go to Hawaii. They would go to Hawaii every winter. And she thought, not this winter, this is not a good winter. And with this, because they had to stop in San Francisco, and she was worried about the transfer of stuff and a plane with the bomb and everything. And well, Clay talked her, you know, and the airlines talked her into it. So they flew, and of course then Desert Storm was over. And so we still couldn't go to the gates yet. They had little seats in the old airport where they would have you seated, and they had the metal detectors and all that. And I can remember the Hawaii flight is an unusual one because it's overnight and you lose hours. And one time I picked him up on the wrong, I went to pick him up and it was the wrong day because I goofed on the hours. So I was sitting there with my 12-year-old son, and I was waiting, and I finally looked at my watch and I thought, have I done this again? You know, and but also what was odd, Mother never ever, she used to always call me and she'd say, honey, I'm in the States, you know, when she arrived in Denver, and she didn't do it this time. And so I thought, I've really made a mistake, you know, this isn't the time. So I finally went up to one of the men and I said, what about the flight from Denver, isn't it overdue? And he goes, yeah, it is. So I had told my son to stay up there, and I was going to go down and talk to the United people. And they had a huge line, and I just said real quiet, you know, quiet, I said, is the plane late? She goes, yes, it's been delayed. So then I went back up and I waited another 5 or 10 minutes. I'm not a patient person, but I'm nervous. So I went down, and this time the entire United, you know, their little folding gate was shut. And all these people were rambling around that were supposed to be on that plane. Like, you know, they just shut the gate. I don't blame them one iota, because I mean, I don't think they knew what to do. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to call United myself, you know, and I went over, and that was during the payphone era, and I called United, and I got a lady, and I said, I'm waiting for flight 585, and it's not arrived in Colorado Springs. Is it still in Denver? And I said, and as I was talking, this woman tapped me on the shoulder, and she said, I've been told that plane has crashed. And I looked at her and I thought, she's even a worse worrier than me, you know, because I thought, from Denver to Colorado Springs, you know. So I turned around and I asked the lady, I said, this woman is telling me this plane has crashed. I said, what is going on here? And the woman said, oh, don't be ridiculous.
The woman on the phone.
Mm-hmm. And I said, I'm not being ridiculous. I said, my parents are on that plane, and I want to know where that plane is. And she said, just a minute, you know, in an irritated voice. And I was sitting there panicking, and I kept looking at this woman. I said, where did you hear this? And she said, it's just around. And so the woman came back on, and she said, well, I do have to inform you there is a problem with that plane. I don't quite know what. And I hung, and that was it. She said, you'll have to just wait at the airport, and they'll, you know, help you. Zero. I was like, I turned to the lady and I said, do you have someone on that flight? She said, yes, my husband. And so we literally walked around the airport in the state, and I ran outside immediately. I screamed up to my son, and he came down, and he had heard it, sitting up, you know, in the waiting area. And he said, Mom, they're saying that plane crashed. And I kept thinking, okay, it's got to be a little plane. It's not Mom's plane. I mean, this is from Denver to Colorado Springs. They don't crash. So I ran outside because I thought, well, I'll see the smoke or something. And I didn't see anything. And so I literally walked around the airport for 2 hours by myself with my son, not, I mean, the brain just didn't function. I mean, and I finally thought, well, I got to call my sister, you know, who lived out in Black Forest, and she said, "What?" She said, what are you talking about?" She didn't even know Mother was coming in that day. And she goes, I said, "I need you here, and I need you here now." So they showed up. It took them about 40 minutes, and they showed up, and they kept trying. They turned all the TVs off. You know, they used to have a TV around kind of a fireplace, as I recall, and all the TVs immediately went off. Everything was kind of shut down, and I just walked around in this state of, and I even went to the baggage people where you'd pick up and I'd say, "Where's flight 585?" Because they wouldn't let me go to the gate. And I ran up to the, you know, the metal detector, and I said, "Where is that plane?" He said, "I don't know, but something is not right." And so then my sister showed up. Well, before she showed up, they kept trying to corral me in this room, all of us in this room. And I said, "No, I'm not going in there. I'm not going to be in a room." I said, I need to be out here. I want to know what's going on." And they kept trying and trying. And finally, my husband was not with me. And he had been with a hockey game. He was helping out during President's Day hockey. And he showed up, and the look on his face was just bad. And I thought, "Oh, Lord, you know, this is not good." And I said, "What have you heard?" He goes, "I really don't know." And he did, but he didn't know for sure that everybody was dead.
How did he know?
On the radio. He was on the radio. What he did is he called me because someone at the rink came up and said, "Bob, did you know there's been a crash? There's been a huge crash at the airport." And he knew my parents were flying in, and he thought. So he called our house, and I wasn't home, and then he called my parents' house. They weren't home. So he got in the car, and then he heard on the radio. And there was also a young man, I will say, that was very interesting. I remembered after talking to you, all of a sudden some United guy, I think that worked there maybe, came, and he was the one that kept trying to corral us into this room. He was standing there, and this man had a microphone, and he said, "Who are you?" And he said, "I'm with a radio station," but he said, "My ex-wife is on that plane, and if it's gone down, my daughter just lost her mother." And I can remember he really backed off, you know. He didn't say anything after that. So I don't know what happened to that guy, because you really just go into a state of shock.